Have you ever found yourself lost in thought, only to realize that the more you understand, the more distant you become from those around you? It's like the deeper you dive, the further away you are from the world you once knew. It's not just in your head, though. The truth is, society has always feared deep thinkers, not because they are wrong, but because they see things others don't want to confront. Ever wondered why history has been so unkind to brilliant minds? From Socrates to Galileo, from Tesla to Schopenhauer, brilliant minds have been ridiculed, silenced, and ignored. But what if the real reason isn't because they were wrong, but because their insights made people uncomfortable? Let's dive into why this happens and what it says about us. Have you ever had that feeling, like the more you think, the more distant you become? It's almost as if the deeper you go into understanding the world, the further away you are from connecting with others. You try to share a complex idea, only to be met with silence or a distracted shift in topic. It's a strange and isolating experience, isn't it? But the truth is, this feeling is not just something in your mind. It's a reflection of a much deeper societal fear, a fear that stretches back throughout history. You see, society has always had an uneasy relationship with deep thinkers. And it's not because these thinkers are wrong. On the contrary, it's because they see things that others would rather not confront. They push boundaries, challenge the status quo, and often make people face uncomfortable truths. Think about it. From Socrates, who was condemned to death for questioning conventional wisdom, to Galileo, who was silenced for revealing the heliocentric theory. Even modern geniuses like Nikola Tesla faced ridicule and dismissal despite their extraordinary intelligence. These brilliant minds weren't rejected because they were wrong. They were rejected because their ideas made others feel uneasy. One philosopher who truly captured this brutal truth was Arthur Schopenhauer. He believed that intelligence could be a curse that isolates those who can see the world clearly, but whose clarity makes others uncomfortable. But why is that the case? Why does society resist and even reject those who think differently, those who think more deeply? The answer lies in human psychology, and it's not as simple as you might think. Let's consider this for a moment. When you stand next to someone who is physically stronger than you, does it make you feel weak? Most of the time, we admire their strength, don't we? Or if you meet someone who is wealthier than you might feel a bit envious, but you don't feel personally attacked. But what happens when you meet someone who is intellectually superior? Something strange happens, doesn't it? You might not even be aware of it, but psychologists have a name for it: the mirror effect. A deep thinker doesn't just share new ideas. They hold up a mirror to those around them, forcing others to confront their own limitations. And guess what? People don't forgive that easily. Just the presence of someone who thinks deeply can make others feel inadequate, even if that person says nothing at all. But why does this intellectual discomfort occur? Why does intelligence provoke such a strong response when other forms of superiority, like strength or wealth, don't? The key is how we process these different forms of superiority. When we encounter someone stronger than us, we might admire them or see them as a protector. If someone is wealthier, we might aspire to their success. These are external qualities, things we can see and measure. But intelligence operates on a whole different level. It's not something we can physically see, but it's tied directly to our identity. When we meet someone who thinks more deeply, someone who questions what we've always taken for granted, it can feel like an attack on our very sense of self. Instead of admiring their intelligence, many people subconsciously resist it. Why? Because their very presence forces others to face their own limitations, their own insecurities. This is why throughout history, deep thinkers have been pushed to the fringes of society. Their insights didn't just challenge ideas, they challenged egos. And the human ego, as we all know, will go to great lengths to protect itself from discomfort. Take a moment to think about your own experiences. Have you ever tried to share a deep or complex idea in a casual conversation, only to be met with blank stares or an awkward silence? Or noticed how quickly people shift topics when the conversation ventures beyond surface-level small talk? It's not just a coincidence, it's a defense mechanism. When people encounter a deep thinker, their mind goes into self-preservation mode. Instead of being curious, they resist. Instead of engaging, they dismiss. And this, my friends, is why intellectuals, philosophers, and deep thinkers throughout history have so often been met with rejection. Visionaries, innovators, and deep thinkers often find themselves isolated, but it's not because they seek solitude. No, they are often pushed away by society itself. It's a strange reality, but it's one that's backed by research. Confidence is often valued more than intelligence in social situations. Think about it. People are naturally drawn to those who exude certainty, even if their ideas are shallow or oversimplified. This is why charismatic individuals, with their simplistic views and bold proclamations, can often gain more influence than the quiet, thoughtful person who speaks with nuance and depth. History is littered with examples of this phenomenon. Charismatic, populist leaders, motivational speakers, and viral influencers have thrived by telling people what they want to hear, by affirming their existing beliefs, rather than challenging them to think critically or confront uncomfortable truths. Meanwhile, those who dare to question widely accepted beliefs or offer complex perspectives often struggle to find a broad audience. This is the paradox of intelligence. The more someone seeks truth, the more they become disconnected from the I majority. And the mirror effect? It doesn't just reflect society's limitations, it highlights why society resists change in the first place. But why does this happen? Is there any scientific proof that people actually fear intelligence? Well, as it turns out, modern neuroscience backs this up. Studies have shown that when people feel intellectually inferior, the brain's amygdala, the part responsible for detecting fear and threats, becomes highly active. In simple terms, deep thinking doesn't just intimidate people. It triggers a primal survival response, much like the one we experience when faced with physical danger. But why would intelligence activate the same fear circuits as an actual threat? The answer lies in how the human brain evolved. For most of human history, survival didn't depend on being the smartest person in the room. No, survival relied on being accepted by the group. Our ancestors lived in tribes where social harmony meant safety. Being ostracized or rejected by the group could literally mean death. This is why, deep down, our brains are wired to prioritize social acceptance over intellectual pursuits. When someone with exceptional intelligence enters a social setting, their mere presence disrupts the tribal balance. Their ideas challenge existing norms. They push against the comfort zone of the group, and they stir the dynamics of social interaction. This triggers the brain's defense mechanisms, almost as if the person is a threat or enemy, rather than simply a deep thinker. This is why many deep thinkers feel isolated. It's not because they lack social skills or struggle with connecting. It's because their intelligence makes them stand out in a world that values fitting in over standing out. Society isn't just rejecting them, it's resisting the very nature of their intellect. And here's something even more fascinating. A study from Stanford University in 2021 uncovered an even more shocking truth. The way deep thinkers are perceived is context-dependent. When people interact with an intellectual one-on-one, they feel less threatened. But put them in a group setting, and the threat response skyrockets. Why? Because in group settings, social status becomes more important. People don't just react to intelligence itself, they react to how others perceive them in comparison. If someone feels overshadowed by a deep thinker, their instinct is to protect their social standing.
They might try to undermine or exclude the person to preserve their own position within the group. This is why deep thinkers often find it easier to have genuine conversations in private, one-on-one settings, but struggle in larger social environments.
The dynamics shift, and the fear of being outshined or judged takes over. Psychologists have also identified a number of cognitive biases that help explain why intelligence is often met with resistance. One of the most notable is the Dunning-Kruger effect. People with low ability tend to overestimate their intelligence, while those with high intelligence often doubt themselves. This creates a friction. Those who know little often believe they know more than they do, and those who know more tend to question their own knowledge. The result? A society that is more comfortable with certainty, even if it's superficial, than with the complex, nuanced truths that deep thinkers bring to the table. Deep thinkers often find themselves up against more than just social resistance. They face a series of psychological and cultural forces that actively work against them. One of the most significant of these is status quo bias. Simply put, the human brain has a natural preference for familiar ideas over new, complex truths. This makes intelligence, which often introduces disruptive or uncomfortable thoughts, a real threat. When deep thinkers challenge the established order, they don't just offer new ideas, they force others to confront their own limitations, and that can be incredibly uncomfortable. Then there's the backfire effect. Have you ever tried to present a new idea or piece of information to someone, only to have them double down on their existing beliefs rather than change their minds? This is exactly what happens when deep thinkers present challenging ideas. People don't want to admit they're wrong, so instead of considering the new information, they cling even harder to their old beliefs. In a world that thrives on certainty, this reaction is almost instinctual. In the digital age, this rejection of intelligence is even more pronounced. Social media algorithms, which prioritize engagement over depth, make it harder for well-reasoned, thoughtful arguments to gain traction. Instead, emotionally charged, controversial, and often misleading content spreads far more easily. Take a look at some of the most viral posts, catchy headlines, simplistic ideas, and sound bites designed to grab attention. In contrast, nuanced discussions are often buried in the noise. The more intellectual someone is, the harder it becomes for them to distill complex ideas into bite-sized, viral-friendly content that will thrive on social platforms. This shift has created a world where entertainment is valued over enlightenment. Society, increasingly, has become more interested in distraction than in deep, meaningful discussions. For deep thinkers, this means it's even harder to find a broad, receptive audience for their ideas. But the rejection of intelligence isn't just social, it's deeply ingrained in human nature. It's biological, psychological, and cultural. It's a force that is both built into the human experience and amplified by modern technology. This doesn't mean deep thinkers should stop sharing their ideas, but it does mean they need to be aware of the forces working against them. So, if society resists intelligence, what does it actually embrace? The answer, as surprising as it may seem, lies in comfort. People gravitate toward what's familiar, predictable, and safe. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most brutally honest philosophers in history, believed that intelligence is not a gift, but a curse. Unlike other thinkers who saw intelligence as the key to success, Schopenhauer argued that the smarter a person is, the more they struggle to connect with society. Why does he believe this? What makes intelligence such a burden? Schopenhauer's philosophy revolves around the idea of the will, a blind, irrational force that drives human behavior. According to him, most people live their lives controlled by the will to live, which is the innate desire for pleasure, comfort, and survival. However, highly intelligent people operate differently. Instead of blindly following their instincts, they develop the will to truth, an insatiable desire to understand reality, no matter how uncomfortable or painful that truth might be. This sets up a fundamental disconnect between intellectuals and the rest of society. While most people find meaning in relationships, entertainment, and routine pleasures, deep thinkers often feel disillusioned by these things. To them, these are distractions from the deeper existential questions that they feel compelled to explore. Schopenhauer believed that the more a person understands human nature, the harder it is for them to relate to others. They see through the lies, the pretenses, and the social games that others take for granted. For deep thinkers, most social interactions can feel shallow. They are filled with small talk, status games, and polite dishonesty. Deep thinkers, who value truth above appearances, often struggle to participate in these superficial exchanges. While most people are content with surface-level conversations, deep thinkers crave meaningful, thoughtful discussions. But in a world that favors simplicity over complexity, finding those kinds of conversations can feel like a rare, fleeting opportunity. In everyday interactions, deep thinkers often find themselves disconnected or bored, not because they lack the ability to engage, but because they see through the illusions that drive most people. They recognize the futility of human desires, the endless chase for money, power, and relationships, and begin to question the very purpose of these pursuits. Unlike the majority who chase these fleeting goals, deep thinkers often wonder if there's more to life than what society celebrates. This tendency to question the conventional leads many intelligent people to feel misunderstood, alienated, or even resented. Simply put, their presence forces others to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. And let's face it, most people would rather avoid that. Schopenhauer, one of history's most brutally honest philosophers, compared intelligence to a heightened sense of awareness, which instead of being a blessing, feels more like a curse. He wrote that a high degree of intellect tends to make someone unsocial, and his reasoning was simple. The more you understand, the less you can ignore. The more aware you become of the world's flaws, the harder it is to find happiness in it. The deeper you think, the lonelier you become. For Schopenhauer, happiness and intelligence were inversely related. He believed that ignorance, not wisdom, was the true key to happiness. This explains why many deep thinkers throughout history, think of figures like Pascal or Kafka, have struggled with depression, existential crises, and social isolation. Intelligence, for Schopenhauer, was not a pathway to joy, but a road to solitude. His view was stark. The more you understand, the harder it becomes to fit into a world that thrives on shallow distractions. However, Schopenhauer didn't just diagnose the problem, he also offered solutions. He believed that while intelligence often leads to loneliness, deep thinkers can learn to cope with it and even thrive in their solitude. For Schopenhauer, solitude was not a punishment, but a privilege. He advised deep thinkers to embrace their alone time, not as something to be avoided, but as an opportunity for intellectual and creative pursuits. Rather than seeking validation from society or trying to fit into the mainstream, Schopenhauer encouraged intelligent people to seek out like-minded individuals. Whether through books, philosophy, or exclusive intellectual circles, he believed that deep thinkers should connect with those who share their intellectual depth. Schopenhauer also stressed the importance of engaging with the world wisely. He warned against blindly sharing profound insights with people who weren't ready for them. Instead, he suggested that deep thinkers should observe society, learn its patterns, and choose their words carefully. His teachings serve as a guide for modern deep thinkers who struggle with social rejection. While intelligence may lead to loneliness, Schopenhauer believed it also grants freedom, wisdom, and a deeper understanding of life. It's a double-edged sword, power and pain in equal measure. Intelligence allows one to see reality more clearly, but it also creates a distance from those who prefer the comfort of illusions. In the end, Schopenhauer's philosophy affirms something we've suspected all along. Society doesn't fear intelligence itself. What it fears is what intelligence reveals. Deep thinkers aren't rejected because they are wrong. They are rejected because they are right. Too soon. They see the world for what it really is. And that can be a frightening thing for those who would rather live in comfortable denial. So if you've ever felt alone in your thoughts, know this. You are not broken. You are simply seeing the world for what it truly is. But does this mean deep thinkers are doomed to permanent isolation? Or are there ways to navigate a world that often resists intellectual depth while still preserving that deep thinking? The answer lies in how human psychology is wired and how institutions shape our thinking from an early age. At its core, the human brain craves certainty and predictability. Evolution has programmed us to avoid mental discomfort, a phenomenon psychologists call cognitive ease. Simply put, the brain prefers simple, familiar information because it requires less mental energy to process. When an idea is complicated, nuanced, or unfamiliar, the brain perceives it as difficult and potentially dangerous. This leads to what psychologists call system justification theory. Essentially, people tend to defend the status quo, even when it works against their best interests. Instead of questioning authority or outdated beliefs, most people prefer to rationalize them because change feels uncertain and unsettling. This is why people often resist intellectual dissent, even when it's based on truth, because questioning accepted norms feels uncomfortable. Another psychological force at play is groupthink. This is the tendency for individuals to conform to widely accepted beliefs, even when those beliefs may not be in their best interest, simply to avoid social rejection. People would rather go along with the crowd than risk being isolated by challenging the popular narrative. This is why intellectual dissenters, those who challenge the mainstream, are often rejected, ignored, or even attacked. It's not that their ideas are inherently wrong. It's that they challenge the very comfort of the group. This deep psychological preference for comfort over complexity is exactly why intellectuals, philosophers, and scientists often struggle to gain mass acceptance, particularly during their lifetimes. Take a look at today's digital world. Who gets the most attention on social media? It's not the intellectuals or the deep thinkers. No, it's the ones who can distill complex ideas into catchy viral sound bites that are easy to digest. Thought-provoking discussions that require time and reflection often struggle to gain traction because depth takes time, and time is something most people don't want to invest in. Meanwhile, viral content is instant, emotional, and easily consumed. Social media algorithms reward engagement, and nothing grabs attention like controversy, outrage, or humor, all of which tend to sideline rational, intellectual discourse. Echo chambers have developed, where people are only exposed to information that reinforces their existing beliefs, making them increasingly resistant to new perspectives. In this environment, deep thinkers who challenge the mainstream narrative often find themselves ignored, misunderstood, or even attacked. But this rejection of deep thinking doesn't just happen online. It starts long before that, in the very institutions that shape our minds. Schools and workplaces are prime examples. The education system claims to value intelligence, but in reality, it rewards obedience over independent thought. Students who memorize and regurgitate information succeed, while those who question authority or challenge the system are often labeled as troublemakers. In the corporate world, workplaces don't necessarily favor the most intelligent or innovative employees. Instead, they favor those who fit the culture and maintain the existing power structures. Politics. Leaders who make bold, unpopular statements based on logic often lose out to those who simply tell people what they want to hear. It's the same story over and over again. Intelligence, innovation, and critical thinking are valued after they've been safeguarded and widely accepted. Just think about the most celebrated intellectuals in history. Many of them were outcasts during their lifetimes. Their ideas were seen as disruptive, even dangerous, and were met with resistance rather than praise. Society claims to value intelligence, innovation, and critical thinking, but in reality, it only celebrates these qualities once they are no longer threatening. Take Galileo, for example. He was imprisoned for his discoveries, but today we praise him as a scientific genius. Van Gogh died in poverty, yet his paintings are now worth millions. Nikola Tesla revolutionized the world of energy, but he lived and died in obscurity. These individuals were not embraced for their brilliance while they lived. They were rejected because their ideas challenged the norms of their time. Society only embraces intelligence once it's no longer a threat. So if deep thinkers continue to struggle with being accepted, what can they do? If you've ever felt misunderstood for thinking deeply, rest assured, you are not alone. The truth is, deep thinkers have always faced challenges in a world that values comfort over complexity. But does this mean they're doomed to remain on the outskirts of society? Or can there be a way for them to find their place without sacrificing their intellectual depth? Throughout history, some of the most brilliant minds were not celebrated during their lifetimes. Instead, they were ridiculed, persecuted, or simply ignored. Their ideas were considered dangerous, disruptive, or just too difficult for society to accept at the time. But one thing these thinkers all had in common is that they were ahead of their time. And because of that, they suffered for their wisdom. Take Socrates, the father of Western philosophy. His life was dedicated to questioning commonly held beliefs, urging people to think critically, examine their own ideas, and embrace logic over blind tradition. But instead of being celebrated for his wisdom, he was put on trial, accused of corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. His real crime? Encouraging people to think for themselves. Despite being given the option to escape his fate, Socrates chose to drink poison rather than abandon his principles. His famous words before his death were, "The unexamined life is not worth living." His death sent a clear message. Society fears those who challenge its core beliefs. Galileo's story is no different. His only crime was discovering the truth. When he proved that the earth revolves around the sun, he shattered centuries of religious dogma. The church, which held power by controlling knowledge, branded him a heretic. He was forced to publicly deny his own discoveries under threat of torture. Even though we now recognize him as one of history's greatest scientists, during his lifetime, he lived under house arrest, and his work was banned for nearly a century. Galileo's story proves that even the most undeniable truths will be rejected if they threaten the existing power structures. Then there was Nietzsche. His work was considered too radical, too unsettling for his time. Nietzsche argued that traditional morality was flawed, that society was built on comforting lies, and that true strength came from creating one's own values.
These ideas were simply too much for people to handle. He was dismissed as insane, and his works were ignored or misunderstood. Yet today, Nietzsche's philosophy influences psychology, literature, and existentialism. His ideas on power, will,
and morality now shape modern thought, showing that society often rejects deep thinkers in the present, only to embrace them in the future. Nikola Tesla was another visionary whose ideas were too advanced for his time. He dreamed of free energy for the world, wireless electricity, and technological advancements that could have revolutionized human civilization. But society, and more specifically, the powerful industrialists like Thomas Edison and J.P. Morgan, saw his ideas as a threat. They profited from selling electricity, so Tesla's idea of free energy was shut down. Despite his genius, Tesla died alone in a small hotel room, forgotten and broke, while others built fortunes using his stolen ideas. His life is a perfect example of how society often rewards businessmen and marketers over true visionaries. Alan. Turing's contributions to cryptography helped end World War II and saved millions of lives. His theories on computing became the foundation of modern artificial intelligence. Yet instead of being honored, Turing was persecuted for his personal life. In 1952, he was chemically castrated for being gay, a decision that led to his tragic suicide at just 41 years old. Today, Turing is recognized as a hero, but in his time, society discarded him despite his incredible contributions. While most historical deep thinkers were men, Hypatia of Alexandria stands out as a rare exception. A philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer, Hypatia challenged the male-dominated intellectual world of ancient Rome. She taught scientific reasoning and rational thought, putting her at odds with the religious authorities. In 415 AD, a mob of religious extremists brutally murdered her, seeing her as a threat to their power. Her story highlights a crucial pattern in history. Intellectual progress is often met with violent resistance. Each of these thinkers shared the same fate. They introduced ideas that were too advanced for their time. They were rejected, ridiculed, or punished while they were alive, yet their ideas later became the foundation of human progress. Society doesn't fear intelligence itself. It fears what intelligence represents: change. And this raises an important question. If history proves that society resists deep thinkers, what can you do if you're one of them? Does this mean deep thinkers are doomed to loneliness? Not at all. It just means you need to understand how to navigate society wisely. Not every place or person is ready for deep conversations. Save your most profound thoughts for people who truly appreciate them. You don't need millions of people to understand you, just the right ones. Seek out those who think like you, whether through books, online communities, or intellectual circles. The greatest thinkers in history found ways to make their deep ideas accessible. Einstein once said, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." Learn to communicate your depth without overwhelming others. Schopenhauer once said, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." Deep thinkers see the world differently, and that will always make some people uncomfortable. But that does not mean you should stop thinking deeply. Society needs deep thinkers. It just doesn't always know how to embrace them. So if you've ever felt like an outsider for your thoughts, remember this: you are not alone. While society may fear deep thinkers, it is these thinkers who push humanity forward. If this video resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced rejection for thinking deeply? Let's start a conversation. And if you want to explore more insights from history's greatest minds, hit that subscribe button, because we're just getting started.